Right, we have waited long enough for nearly 7 minutes. That's fine. Right, so hello everyone. Today is a continuation of the Bike, the little Valentines project for IMVU. So we're making a simple little furniture item with handlebars. Needs handlebars. And we're going to well, yesterday we added a simple bobbing animation. So the furniture item just bobs up and down. So yesterday we added that in Blender, exported, and got that all set up and working. So we created our action. And we've got it triggered when the avatar sits on the seat. So when they sit on the seat, it activates the animation. And the trigger for that is stance dot whatever the seat node is called. So that's morph-o-matic in this instance. And then you need to add hyphen and then the seat number. So this is there's only one seat with this furniture item, so that's seat 01. And that will trigger the animation to work when the avatar uses the spot. So what we're going to do today is take a look at adding morph animations, or shape keys as they're called in Blender. And we're going to see if we can get the exhaust to do a little animation. As the furniture item bobs up and down, the exhaust needs to do a little animation. So we're going to try and do that in Blender today. A little underused feature. So switch over to Blender, and we've got the morph-o-matic already loaded. Might be worth just quickly going over what's been done so far. So we've got our mesh, which is the bike itself. That's parented to a control node, which is the item or the element that controls the animation, and that's a simple bobbing up and down. And that in turn is linked to the root node that controls everything. That never animates. We don't animate that one. But what we can do with this setup is we can control certain aspects of the mesh or the furniture item and the seating that's associated with it. So that's the avatar spot where the avatar is sitting, and the handle, both of which move when they don't move, they move with the animation. So if you were doing a triggered where you have to type a word, or let's do the other one, which is stance.idle. Stance.idle. So the handle node moves with the furniture. So you can set your furniture items up, or your same applies to rooms actually. You can set your furniture items up so that your control node controls elements specific to do with whatever animates, whereas everything else, so that's the capture and picture node in this instance. Oh, hi Liana. The capture and picture in this instance, they are parented or linked to the root node, and they are static They don't move. So using this division splitting, when you split your project into animated and non-animated parts, you can control how the object is used in IMVU. So if actor that's the wrong one, that's the actor, so what we want is, there we go. How? So they do their interactive, oh, his neck. They do their interactive pose on the capture and picture spots that are on the ground. And the furniture item continues to animate in this instance because we've got the animation automatically triggered. So now what we're going to do is add some shape keys. So we need to select the mesh, and all we're going to do really is just do something relatively simple, which is having the exhaust perhaps move backwards and forwards as if it's just putting as it moves along. And we'll probably do both of them just to keep it simple, so both do the same action. Right, so select the mesh, object data, and we need the shape keys section. So object data, shape keys, and we need this section now. We need to add a shape key. Now this initial key, basis, that's essentially that's like the default pose that the avatar is in when you are creating an avatar pose. So this is essentially a reset. So it's the position of the object as it is originally. So to add the shape keys, what we need to be doing is we can add the keys, but in order for them to make sense, in edit mode we change the shape of the object. So if we add a shape key, so it's giving us an automatically named one, key 1, switch to edit mode with key 1 still selected, what we can do is select all of that, do the same on the other side. And then using the widget, we've got it in global, so that's okay. Using the widget, we'll just move the mesh or the selection, and that is a shape key. So if we exit edit mode, we'll get the original or the default position, and our shape key, but we can check the shape key by sliding left click drag the value indicator, and this just checks the shape key. That does it to both of them. That's good. So what else could we do? So we can add another one, key 2, edit mode. Let's shrink. So these are called loop selections. So normally when you right click select something, it will only select a single or individual element that's directly underneath the mouse cursor. But what you can do is Alt right click and it'll select a loop. And if you hold Alt Shift right click, you can add additional loops to your selection. And then you can continue with your normal selection just holding Shift and then right clicking. So what can we do here? We can, let's shrink this, whoops, wrong way. Shrink that down a little bit. Yes, that'll do. Exit edit mode. So we can check that one, left click dragging the slider. So we've now got 2 shape keys. Just save the file, save as 14. Always a good idea to save the file as you do major changes to your project so that you've got a restore point essentially to go back to if you need to. Right, so to use these, now that we've got 2 shape keys, to use these in the same way that we use the action editor to create an animated node, shape keys have their own editor. So we select, making sure that the mesh is selected, we want shape key editor, and this presents us with this. So we've got another timeline, but the 2 shape keys that we've created are listed. And all you need to do to create your shape key animation is just change the values of the sliders, and that will automatically insert a shape key where the cursor is or where the timeline scrubber is, and it will do it per shape key. So as soon as you change, even if the key value was set to 0, as soon as it's changed or modified or fiddled with, it'll insert a key. So all we need to do now is do our normal timeline editing, not editing, timeline creation. So we are essentially, instead of placing keyframes based on the position of nodes, or bones if you were using an armature, with shape keys we're doing the same thing or using the same process. So we've got key frames, but with shape keys our key frames have shape keys or shape deformation information in them. So click or drag the timeline slider, Do that as 1. Timeline slider again. And to make sure that when you are exporting for IMVU, to make sure that the shape keys are interpreted correctly, even if there are no, even if the shape key is not being used, it's always best to set a value. 30. Let's zoom in on that a little bit. There we go. Right, so we're at 30. So what did we do for? So we want that to go in. So what was the first one? Right, so this is a looping animation as well, so we need to make sure that whatever we do within the sequence, the first and last frames are exactly the same. So 40. And that gives us a little and of course as with the nodes and other animations, you can play around with your timing so that you don't have such regular spaced spots. So, for example, and that changes the timing so that it doesn't look quite so regular. So what we can do now is play around with reset that. So that's the last one. If we consider that the last frame, we have to make sure that the first frame is also set up so that that has the same value. So what we end up with is something that looks as if it pulses. So if you weren't happy, because those look a bit off kilter, so we can go back into, is that the second frame? That's the key 2. So we can go back into edit mode and we can make adjustments to these. Go into local. Oh, it's not going to do it, so normal. That'll do it. Nope, that's not quite doing it either. So global, just have to be careful with there we go. So what we're doing is just aligning the ends up a little bit better to follow through, and this should remain as part of the keyframe, part of the shape key. See? So even though you've got your shape keys established, or originally established them, you can edit them at any point. But to edit them, you are in edit mode in order to do it. And you might note that whilst we're just playing this short sequence, which is only 40 frames, the furniture item is also bobbing up and down. Well, it's starting to do the bob. And that gives us a highlight or an indication of what IMVU will do once we get everything sorted out. So let's save that. Oops, wrong one. Save as 15. And we can try exporting this to see what happens. So you can see the values change as the timeline slides over each of the keyframes, which holds shape key information. The values change. So shape keys, in effect, are, you work with them in just the same way that you would do with any other animation. So you are inserting a key frame, which is where the diamonds are marked. That's your keyframe. But instead of, let's say for example, the position of a node or the position of a bone for an avatar, it's just inserting the position of vertices or vertexes relative to their shape key information. So let's just save that again. Let's export this to see what happens. So File, Export, FBX. Now, hang on, so we need to do something here before we do this, because apply modifiers, or so the IMVU FBX team people, or so they say, that if we use apply modifiers on a shape key or morph animation, it'll break the morph animation. So that means that our object has a modifier assigned to it in the form of an edge split. So that's creating our smooth groups. So in order for this to export properly to IMVU, we need to apply this. So apply modifier cannot be applied to mesh with shape keys. Oh no. Right, so we're going to have to see what happens then. Right, need to make a note of that, because that might be something for the FBX team to address. Because that means that so that would mean that before you add your shape keys, you would have to apply any modifiers that are going to change the structure of the mesh. So that makes sense why. Right, I see why apply modifiers would break shape keys then. Well, let's try it and see what it does. Because what that does, the way that shape keys work, the way that they actually work, is that they're taking the position of individual vertices or vertexes Where's my annotation tools? Oh, there we go. So it's taking the position of each of the individual vertexes in 3D space. So we've got our 3D space coordinates, and it's using those coordinates to produce the difference in the shape key. Now, the way that the modifier works, the way that the edge split modifier works, what it's doing is creating a virtual split along edges that are marked as sharp, but it's not physically splitting the mesh. And that's what smooth groups technically actually do to meshes when they are rendered in IMVU. So I wonder if we can do this the hard way and force a split. Well, let's just export it first and see what it does. Because what let me just what I'll do here is right, so just a quick explanation of what's going on here and why the apply modifier setting and shape keys are a bit they can be problematic, to use that word. Right, so right now this cube is flat shaded. It has hard edges. If we enable smoothing, it makes everything look mushy. So you, generally speaking, you will need smoothing to be in place, because it determines how objects are lit and how light behaves across surfaces. So just added a few basic curved surfaces. So even though this is a low poly object, just imagine that this top surface, well, each of these faces is a curved surface. So the way that we can create hard edges is by marking them as sharp. So that adds a blue highlight, which tells us that that edge will be marked sharp and will appear as a very hard edge. And we control that, or we activate that with an edge split modifier. And what that does, you can either set it by angle or sharp edges. So if you want greater control, just sharp edges. So disable edge angle, and as we can see, most of the mesh looks all mushy, whereas this front face looks quite sharp. But the surfaces are still attached to the mesh. So what Blender is actually doing here is creating a virtual split along the edge. What actually happens is this. So if we wanted hard edges around the entire object, when the object gets into IMVU, Unity, whatever program toolkit it is, it does that. It physically breaks the vertices, or the coincidental as they're called, coincidental vertices. So there's one there, which so that travels along this set of edges, and then there's another one in exactly the same position, but it travels along this set of edges. So smack bang in the middle there are two vertices that are in exactly the same position coordinates wise, and for IMVU and other games they all do this, unless they've got some proprietary system set up. They're actually physically split. It splits the faces apart. Whereas before, with just the edge split modifier, the selected area was still attached to these surfaces. So if we keep that in mind in relation to morph targets, you can't split the mesh after the fact because you're actually adding additional vertices to the shape key, and the shape key may not have considered those as part of the original shape that was created when the actual shape key was set up, the original shape key. So on export to FBX, this is why, I guess this must be why the FBX team mentioned that the apply modifier setting may break shape keys. So let's try this with all of that little explanation in mind. Let's just try this and see what it does. So export FBX, selected, apply modifiers because we need the smooth groups. Armatures, deselect, add leaf bones. Animation, we want NLA strips disabled, and we want force start and end keying disabled. And what this should do is force the exporter to export animations that it finds as individual sequences. So double check, selected. Right. Okay. Okay, so 15. Where's the... Oh, right, there we are. Autobike 13, 15, that's okay, right. So, export. Oh, that was quick. So I wonder if the way around this then may be to export the base item so that you've got everything set up and working as a furniture item, and then any subsequent version that's exported that includes any animations can just be well, let's do it. So FBX import, load FBX. And that was Bike 15. Okay. Uh-oh, hasn't found it. So, because what it should do, down at the bottom here where we've got morph actions, there should be a animation sequence in the same way that there was for the furniture item. So it hasn't brought that in. So what we need to do, let's try this the hard way then. Deselect everything. Export FBX. Deselect selected objects. Let's try this first. So export again, overwrite the file. Okay. Cancel that. Load FBX again. 15. Open. No skeleton. So this is interesting. Which one will it be? That one or that one? Bike. I guess it'll be that one, but let's see. Configure FBX. That's okay. Yeah, still no morph animation. I know, right? It's when the select skeleton root pop-up comes up. Depending on how you've exported your file, as Liana's pointing out, the options it gives you aren't as straightforward as it could be. Right, so let's cancel that. I wonder then if Let's try that again. Export. But this time disable apply modifiers. Leave everything else as is. And then export. IMVU. Load FBX. $15. So you want root. Okay. That's all right. There we go. Right, okay. So you have to disable. Wasn't quite sure about that because at the time that was put into place during the FBX testing, it wasn't quite clear how that worked. So the way to do this then is to create your whatever it is that you're creating. So whether it's an accessory, a clothing item, furniture or rooms, if it's all going to have shape keys, you want to initially set up your working product, so your mesh, as in this instance the mesh, and the basic furniture item animation. Get all that sorted out so that you know what everything's supposed to look like, where it's supposed to be, etc., etc. And then once you've done that, you can import as a separate file your morph animation. So if we now disable, not disable, just deselect all of these elements, so we don't need any of the meshes, and that's automatically deselected all the materials that were associated with it because they're not needed. We don't need the Hartobike skeletal animation or the action because that's the one that's actually playing right now. All we want is the morph key. So we need to change the scale on this to 0.01 to match everything else, and then import blah de blah de blah materials. Okay, import changes and apply. Right, so in actions, stance.idle is the one for the bike. So we've got our skeletal animation set up already. So that's this need to change color. Green, that's this section. So that's our skeletal animation, and that's what's controlling this thing going up and down. So what we want now is to change or update the morph animation section at the bottom. We should now have our morph animation. So if we click on the selector, there is our morph animation. And if we apply, so we need to set loops to 0. That loops set at 0 loops infinitely. We don't need loop set at loop start or loop end. Blend in, blend out, we don't need. Playback speed, we don't need to change that. Blend height, we don't need to change that. So hopefully that is not working. Oh, hi Miyaka. We are just going over trying to get morph animations, or shape keys as they're called in Blender. So let's just disable that for now. Yep. Yep, lots of fun. so it's not doing anything, so that means that we have probably got a setting to change in Blender. Oh, so Miyaka's just saying she dug out the driveway, which means lots of snow. I think it's something to do with this relative. So let's disable that. No, that's not right. That's flip to top, makes it just easier to see. Key. Need to do a quick bit of research here, because that should work. Save. Let's take a look at the FBX file. Oh, I know what we can do. Let's check to make sure that so this is the Autodesk FBX tools. So there's either FBX tools or I can't remember what that is, but this gives us an FBX previewer. So what we can do is drop the file into the previewer, and it's not showing us anything, so that basically means that there's an issue with the file. Okay, so Miyaka, question for you. When you are exporting or setting up your shape keys, they have to be a certain type of shape key, don't they? There's a is it a setting or a property that I can't remember the name of it. Is it not relative? Where's the docs? Right, here we go, morph. I have to do it on a different device in order to oh, here we go, clamped, averaged, exclusive or additive. Right, so according to the Education Centre, morph naming conventions. The morph targets have a naming convention that dictates what kind of morph they are. This naming convention must be used on your morph, or your morphs will not play back in IMVU. An example of a properly named morph target is leftblink.clamped, where the .clamped suffix is the morph type. The prefix of the name can be anything you like, so that's the left blink bit. Here's a breakdown of what the 4 morph types are and what they mean. So .clamped, so this is going to be like .sitting, .standing or .custom pose. .clamped allows multiple morph animations to affect the channel, but clamps the sum of their efforts to 100%. Average allows multiple morph animations to affect the channel, so these individual listings are essentially channels. Exclusive allows only one morph animation, the most recent one applied, to affect the channel. No cap on value, so that's 0 to 1, so you can have a value that's higher than 1. And additive allows multiple animations to affect the channel. Values are added together. So you tend to use exclusive. Right, okay, so let's try that. We need to rename our keys. So let's just call this shape1 dot exclusive, double click shape2 dot exclusive. Let's just save this so we've got a different version, 16. Okay. Right, so shape2 exclusive, shape1 exclusive. I don't think we need to do anything to basis. Right, so export FBX. So we're going to export everything that's in the scene to make sure that Blender grabs the shape key sequence data. We're going to make sure that apply modifiers is disabled for this, because all we need is the shape key animation, but we do need to grab everything that's in the scene. Armature, disable all of that. Animation, NLA strips and force start and end are disabled, so export. Oops, 16. Export Right, so that's exported everything. So back to IMVU. FBX import, load FBX 16. There's 16. So we want root with 10 bones, 4 meshes. Configure FBX. That's okay. Import changes. Right, so it's brought in our shapekey morph action, so we can disable all of this. Don't need it. Disable or deactivate or deselect the node animation, which was the byte going up and down. Apply scale 0.01 and then import. Oh, why is it doing 239 again? I need to check something. Yes, yeah, switch device. Right, so it's exported the duration length, which is 239 frames, although it says 240 because we're starting at frame 1, not frame 0. But let's try that anyway. So import. Okay. Apply changes. So actions. That's still not doing anything. Oh, that's because we've got the wrong. Yep, still not doing anything. Because the shape key should be applying, it should be active now. So let's have another look at the docs. Yeah, so that's basically the information that AutoKey import, right? That should be working. So let's try renaming the, because it could be that from Blender only certain name types, or whereas where we've got exclusive, let's try averaged. Because what IMVU is doing, it's pulling the information about the shape keys and interpreting that information relative to the names given to the shape keys. So I wonder if just checking another tutorial. Hold on a moment. Just checking an old tutorial. It was made with an older version of Blender, but it should be applicable still. But it was exported with Cal 3D, not FBX. So perhaps with Cal 3D, with FBX, it's the settings have to obey what the FBX format is expecting from 3D Studio Max, not from Blender. So that's averaged. Do we have to change basis as well then, I wonder? Let's try that. Just save over that file because we know it wasn't working anyway. FBX import. '16. Deselect all of those bits, we don't need them. And that, we don't need that. Import. Yeah, that's not working either. That's odd. That's funny. Just doing some research on shape keys just brings up Cat Spitz tutorials, so it brings up the tutorials that I've written, which is kind of funny. Let's double check. So apparently we need to check that shape key has an an action associated with it. So that doesn't. So let's create an action. Not quite sure how this will work. Unless, oh, I see. Oh, I think I get what's going on. Right, so let's try this. So I'm going to do this again. So delete all of that. Action. Right, so what we're doing for IMVU which this seems a little odd. Because how is it supposed to know? Whoops. How is it supposed to know? Unless the keyframes no, that doesn't make any sense. Because you can't the shape key, the problem may be that the shape key, it needs an action. But if you create an action, all you're essentially doing is just creating an empty action. There's no keyframe data associated with the actual shape key, because the shape key sequence is, well, we lost that. Yeah, I just reload the file, because the shape key is associated with the shape key editor. But the problem with that is that the way that the IMVU exporter works, or the way that the IMVU importer works, I should say, is that it's expecting an action associated with every animation that's available. But you can't, I mean, we can change the values of the shape key, but I don't think it only changes the shape key in the shape key editor. It doesn't do anything within the action editor, because the action editor is not related to the shape key editor. Yeah, so that's to do with exporting using Cal3D, not FBX. Just doing some more reading. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, the only way I can think that that would work is that, so we have a 1, 5, 20, 35 and 40. So the only way I can think that that would work is to literally just 1, 5, 20, what's the other one, 40, 35, and the other one was 20. Whoops. So there's nothing actually in the action doesn't actually do anything because you can't. But if there's a correlation between the action editor and the, well, let's just try it. Save as, just so that we don't remake this. 17. Any ideas from chat? So export FBX. So disable those. $17. Okay. Export. Yeah, so that's not done anything. FBX import, .fbx was 17. Disable all of those because we don't need them. Disable those two because we don't need them. Now we've got two entries here. No worries, Miyaka. Import. Apply changes. So let's try. Nope. And nope. Yeah, that should be playing, but it's not. I'm not entirely sure why. So let's try exporting that as Cal 3D and see what that does. So let's go back to the original 16. So we have to enable Cal 3D now. So user preferences, add-ons. Cal 3D, enable, close. Not sure if this will work because the Cal 3D exporter expects an armature skeleton, so I'm not quite sure how this will work. So select the mesh which is associated with morphs, export, IMVU Cal 3D. So let's just try doing a morph. See if that will let us. Well, not with FBX. No, I mean the morph data. Miyaka's just asking no XPF, not with FBX. No, because the morph data is included in the FBX file, and when that's imported into IMVU, IMVU converts the morph data that it finds in the FBX file into the XPF file or the morph file. But using Cal 3D, you have to, obviously, as you know, you have to export the XML files separately. But using FBX, all this data, so your skeleton, mesh, materials, animation, morphs, and whatever else is they're all separate for Cal 3D, but included, the data is included in the FBX file. Right, so that should have exported an FBX XPF file. Right, so what happens when we import that, add XPF? There's the XPF file. That doesn't work either. Yes, Yaka, the morphs are linked or associated with the mesh. So these are our morph targets, as you would call them, or our shape keys. And we've got a sequence set up that's associated with the mesh. Yeah, so it works. It works in a different way. I mean, the result is the same. You morph the mesh is morphed or the shape is changed, but the way that actually works in Blender is different to 3D Studio Max. So we don't have like with Max, when you were showing us your Christmas tree thing, you had different mesh versions of your Christmas trees, if I remember correctly. Essentially one bent to one side and another instance bent to the other side. In Blender, we don't need the actual meshes. We just edit the original mesh. We can change the shape of the original mesh and create our shape keys. And that's what stores it. Well, the data or the values that are associated with the position of object, the vertices, is stored as a key that we can then assign in an animation. So we don't have duplicate meshes with different distortions. Those distortions are saved essentially as just coordinates in space within the same mesh. So I'm wondering then if, so what have we tried? We've tried clamped, no, we've tried exclusive, average. So let's try renaming these clamped. Whoops. I seem to recall something to do with the name of these things being that only one of them worked, but I can't remember which one it was. So let's just export that. Oh, save the file. So we've got, oh no need to do that. Export, FBX, deselect, deselect. Let's call this 16B. Export. So this is the process of sometimes having to trying to get something to work. This is what you sometimes have to do, because it's not always as simple and straightforward as it could be or should be. So FBX import. Actually, let's close this and open the file again. So we've got a clean file. So FBX import, import FBX 16B, root yes, bugs. So we don't need any of that. Change the scale 0.01, disable that, So we've got our morph. The morph, see, the morph has come in. It's being recognized. Import. I wonder if no, that's not working either. Whoops. Yeah, so, I mean, Miyaka's just saying that she's trying to sort out a bug with one of her items where, for some unknown reason, textures are swapping around. So this is what happens sometimes, is things don't quite work the way that you're expecting them to. Even so, even though they should. Because we should be getting an animation, morph animation, but we're not. So back to Blender. So that's clamped, averaged, exclusive. So we need to try additive. So that's still working. Just need to change the C. So that's off, that's off, that's off. Those two are off. Export. So import FBX, load FBX, 16C, root, import changes, and again it's brought in a shape key, and it's still doing a 239 frames. So disable all the meshes, we don't need those. Import, apply changes, whoops, additive. Yep, that's not working either. I wonder if there's either there's something missing in the export process, or the setup, or there's an issue with the FBX exporter, or either or both. I'm not sure. So this is odd because may have to do some research on this, because this should not be doing this. So either we're missing something from the export process, or there's something going on with the export, or both. I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, see, I'm not sure how. Because changing the value, if we were to add an action, changing the value of any of these shape keys should insert a keyframe in the timeline, but it doesn't, because it's not recognizing the fact that there's anything going on there. So I'm not sure how the requirement for IMVU to see an action associated with any animated sequence, I don't quite understand how that comes into play, because that data is not associated with the action or the action editor in any way, shape or form. It's associated with the shape key editor. So any changes that are made to shape keys only apply from the point of view of creating a keyframe to the shape key editor. Yeah, so right now this is not making any sense whatsoever. Yeah, I'm stuck. I'm actually genuinely stuck here. because we've done shapekey animation before, but that's with armatures, not with nodes. Yeah, so that's the action that's associated with the node that's selected. But there isn't an action for shapekey. So that node does not have a shapekey associated with it because it's just a node, but the mesh does. But that doesn't have an action. So we can create one, which then means we have two actions. Heart-a-bike is associated with the node that we selected, but this other one is associated with the mesh. But I'm not sure at all how keyframes are inserted into an action for shapekey. Doesn't make any sense. Yes, Miyaka, quite true. I have to do some off-camera sleuthing. So I think rather than this being, I mean, we managed the first part of it. We actually did do a shapekey. That is how you create a shapekey. So you create in the shapekey properties. In shapekey properties, you create your shape keys, modify the mesh how you want it to appear, and those are your shape keys. And then within the shape key editor, you create your animation. So in this instance, it's just the two shape keys working together to create that put or puff puff or whatever sound you want to make as the heart-a-bike moves along. So we have an action. We have a shape key animation sequence, but how we get that, which is on the mesh, how we get that out of Blender and into IMVU, that's the question. So we're going to have to do some offline sleuthing, as Miyaka said, and try and work this out. And maybe tomorrow, I guess, because it's getting quite late here now. So maybe tomorrow, or well, whenever the next stream is, because I don't know how long this will take to do some testing, we'll take a look at getting shape keys sorted out using FBX files. Right, so on that note then, we'll call it quits now. Thanks for dropping by, people in the chat. So that's Miyako, Liana, and then all the lurkers lurking. And we shall see you on the next stream, whenever that is, either tomorrow or possibly more likely the day after, because things like this often take quite a while to sort out. Well, it works. I know it works because I've written the tutorials about morph. That's the irony. I wrote the tutorials on morph animations for Blender, but that was using Cal 3D, and we didn't necessarily need to do the naming. We didn't need to rename the targets. So something's changed, something's modified. Using FBX has introduced all sorts of different issues that have to be catered to, I guess. So now have to go back over the morph information and double check all of the instructions for that and try and work out why the FBX format is not working the way that it should, because as we saw, it is actually importing. So let's do that again. It is importing a morph sequence, or something that looks like blah-de-blah. So it is importing the morph sequence, which is that for this bit at the bottom. It has imported it. So if this data were not valid, the importer wouldn't import it. It would be blank, and it's as it's done in previous iterations of testing this. There's nothing there because the exporter doesn't understand what's going on. So there is something there. It's just not set up, formatted, whatever it is that IMVU is looking for. It's not working. So need to just do some testing and double check to see how all of that is set up and working. Yeah, no worries, Miyaka. I mean, the general principle is exactly the same with Blender as it is with Max, except just the mechanism through which it's done differs slightly, that's all. So you have to actually produce a mesh, whereas we don't. We can modify our original mesh, and it stores the data, the vertex data for the you know what? I wonder. No, I don't know. We mentioned, or we discussed earlier, that the apply modifiers setting has to be disabled because it breaks morph targets, because of what we discussed earlier with smooth groups actually splitting the mesh. So I wonder if it could be that the morph targets right now are assigned to a mesh where... Whoops, why isn't that working? Why is that not working? That's very weird. It's associated with a mesh with intact vertices. So this edge shares this vertex is not split to create this hard edge. But in order for it to create a hard edge in IMVU, come on, IMVU, it has to physically split the vertexes. So it could be that in creating the morph animation, the morph targets are associated with a completely different set of vertices. So that could be a reason why it's not working. I don't know about a eureka moment, Liana, but it's possibly so. When you do your morph animations or morph targets, it may very well be that, as we saw when we tried to apply the modifier, the edge split modifier, which gives us our smooth groups, if we apply it with the morphs active, it won't work. It'll give us this error message. So what we might have to do, let's try that. So just get rid of all of that. Yeah, because now what we've got is a set of split vertices. See, this is what smooth groups are. And that would mean potentially that if you were doing a morph target after, well, not after, before you'd split the mesh, it would basically mean that you are potentially using the wrong set of vertexes or vertices as your targets for your morph. So I have to test that. Yeah, so made in Blender, but getting it into IMVU is a whole other kettle of fish, as Liana is saying. Right, so okay, well that's something that we can take a look at. So until the next time, either tomorrow or what day is it today? Monday, so that's Tuesday, Wednesday. Well, we'll see. Might just do a stream, unrelated stream tomorrow. Don't know. Right, so thanks for watching everyone and enduring this torturous process of trying to bug fix or sort out a problem exporting stuff. And this is something that happens frequently, not just with IMVU but with other things. Right, alright then. Thanks for sticking with it. Yeah, you're very welcome. So thanks to you two. That's Miaka and Liana. And we shall see you on the next